Is Mark there? Okay. They're ready to go? Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to December. It's hard to believe that it is here already, and it's finally here. It's been quite the year already. But December 1st is our special council meeting to discuss the 2021 capital budget. And I want to welcome everyone to it. Thank the staff who have been involved in preparing our documents for us to consider today. And I'll note that we are all here in attendance today. I'll ask for a disclosure of pecuniary interest and general nature thereof from anyone. Seeing none, I'll just mention that we will not be dealing today with the following items on the regular agenda. Item 2, Item 4, Item 5, Item 7, Item 9, Item 11, Item 12, and Item 13. I will ask Police Chief Mike Callahan. It's our honor to be able to refer to him today in this chamber for the first time with that new role. I'll ask Police Chief Mike Callahan and our Police Service Board Chair Jack Miller to make a presentation to Council with respect to the 2021 police budget, capital issue number 1.070. Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning, Your Worship, members of Council, staff. I don't have to tell you, I don't think that 2020 has been a year like no other, and that is certainly most true for the women and the men that are on the front lines every day, whether it's a pandemic or just through what we used to know as normal times. The challenges faced every day by the Belleville Police Service are certainly significant, and they are forever growing. Fortunately, over the years through the capital budget process, our officers and our civilians have been given the tools needed to address the needs day to day and in those situations that might be out of the ordinary. Over the last couple of years, we have also included a number of capital items in the budget specifically for a new police station. You may have heard we finally moved in. A year ago, I stood at this podium and I assured you that going forward, the need would decrease. Well, we're all moved in, and as promised, staff and the Police Services Board have brought forward a reduced capital requirement for 2021. I'll turn it over to Chief Mike Callahan to speak to the budget and answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Chair Miller. Mr. Mayor, City Council members, and City staff, thank you for this opportunity to appear before you and answer any questions that you have in relation to our budget. I'm just going to see, Mark Coa, would you be able to, thank you, sir.
So while he catches up with that, Chief, so it's been almost 3 weeks. How's it been going?
Fantastic so far, and thank you very much to City Council for supporting us in the purchase and build of a new police station. We're extremely happy to be in the new facility, and it's kind of ironic because as we've been decommissioning the old one at 93 Dundas, as we go in there, we realize how it had served its purpose well and was ready to move on.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, I apologize. I've got the, for some reason my presentation isn't showing up, but I'm pleased to report that we've developed a 2021 budget that has the ability to meet our needs within the police service, meet those mission critical goals, and at the same time ensure that we are able to be responsible to the taxpayers. And you'll note that we've had several meetings with our members, and we ended up cutting as much as we possibly could, while at the same time, okay, thanks. While at the same time, maintaining a level of service and a commitment to community safety in Belleville. And I think it's critically important to recognize that when we looked at this budget, we were identifying mission critical items that we needed for 2021 to move forward. So, and you'll in our budget, you'll see that we're additionally pleased that we are 10% lower than 2018, 231% less than 2019, and 124% less than 2020. And we are cognizant that we had 2 years that were very, very critical years that we had to seek additional funding for the new building. But coming in even 10% lower than 2018, I think, is a very, very strong demonstration that we were trying to cut at every possible corner available to us. You will notice in your budget that we've redacted some of the items that were identified, and the specific reason of that is for the protection of the investigations that may be underway and the equipment was specific to, and or covert operations. However, that being said, if there are any specific questions in relation to any of those items, I'm more than willing to answer those questions for you.
Great, thank you. Colleagues, anybody have any questions for Chief Callahan on the 2021 capital budget for the police service? Just for the information of those that may be watching, the budget documents are online under the city's website for agendas, and the police service budget is item number 1.070, and there's an itemized list of issues as well as the individual costs. Well, Chief, I don't think we have any questions for you.
Okay, that's a good news.
But I do want to take this opportunity, like I always do, to ask you to please relay to the women and men in the police service our appreciation for the work that they do. We would love to be able to do much more. Fiscal restraints require us to do what we can, and we're very proud of the fact that we're able to supply your service with the resources you need to do your jobs, and we're very happy with the jobs that you're doing.
Thank you.
Please pass it on. Ask your members to stay safe, and I hope they all can enjoy the holidays in spite of COVID-19, and we look forward to working with you on the operating side come in the spring.
Thank you very much, and while I have this opportunity, thank you to City Council for your continued support in our police service. It's something that we're very proud of, to have a strong working relationship with City Council, and having our members live here in our community is, to me, a very strong sign of the commitment level of our men and women and all the members of the service. So thank you very much for your continued support.
All right, thank you. So the resolution is that the presentation by Police Chief Mike Callahan and the Police Service Board Chair Jack Miller regarding the 2021 police budget be received and referred to capital issue number 1.070. Moved by Councillor Sandison, seconded by Councillor Kelly. All in favor? It's carried. So a motion to go into committee of the whole to hear and consider reports, passing of recommendations and resolutions with myself in the chair. Moved by Councillor Sandison, seconded by Councillor Thompson. All in favor? It's carried. Reports. So just before I welcome Director Hines to the podium, and you can go if you'd like, just to give everyone an idea, sort of the rundown of how things are, I expect them to go this morning. Director Hines will give her presentation on the budget. We will receive that presentation. Councillor Sandison, as chair of the Finance Committee, will make a statement on the budget, and then we will move into in-camera to deal with an item there. I expect that will take us up until lunch. And so we will reconvene with 8B1, which will be the line items of the budget, and deal with them after there. So for members of the media, I'm anticipating that we'll be back. We're going to take an early lunch, I'm expecting today, so that we can deal with it. So I'm expecting that we will reconvene for noon, and then we'll start on 8B1, which will be the line or the individual items on the budget. That's the forecast right now. We'll try to keep everyone updated on this, but for those watching at home and for those who are reporting on it, I just wanted to give everyone a rundown of that. So we'll move to 8A1, the 2021 capital budget, Director of Finance Treasurer's presentation. And I'll welcome Ms. Hines to the podium.
Okay, so I'd like to thank everybody for coming today, and certainly like to thank everybody for all of their support in getting this budget together, particularly to the staff, to Brandon, to Kyle, to Jennifer, and my other finance staff. They've been absolutely wonderful to try and get this capital budget together. And again, unusual times for everything. So we'll work through the budget today. If you have any questions as we go along, feel free to ask them, or if you want to save them to the end, that's fine as well. So each municipality determines the services and level of services to be provided. In the capital budget, we present the infrastructure items which support the provision of these services: improvements to roads, buildings, replacement vehicles, and enhancements to parks. In the 2021 budget, we're focusing on projects which support the continuation of current strategic plan initiatives, infrastructure maintenance and renewal, maintenance of existing service levels, and the introduction of some service level enhancements. The projects presented represent submissions from each city department. The master list of projects is reviewed, discussed, and edited to create a budget which is affordable and can be delivered in a reasonable time frame. Each department submitted their capital budget requests and forecasts to finance in September, and a series of meetings were held to collectively review each capital issue with department staff, CAO, treasurer, and members of the finance committee. A key part of a sustainable, coordinated capital program is the ability to compare competing needs and priorities across the city. To conduct this comparison, each project is assessed a priority score based on the capital project prioritization matrix shown in the following slide. This is a decision matrix used to prioritize each project. The maximum possible score is 100. Scores for each project are shown on the capital budget summary, as well as a detail sheet provided for each proposed project. In our discussions with departmental staff, we also consider their ability to manage and deliver the project in reasonable time, the readiness of each project phase presented for consideration, such as the completion of engineering design and drawings or environmental assessments prior to construction. We also consider the availability of funds to complete the project, the application of external financing to projects demonstrating the highest score or need, and conservative use of debt and taxation. The 2021 draft capital budget is $36,113,400 versus $39,405,500 in 2020. Funding from taxation has been held constant at $5.6 million to support recovery from the effects of COVID-19. Grant funding is 52% lower than 2020, which featured 3 projects funded in part by ISIP grants. There's a 40% reduction in transportation-based projects and a 100 to 200% increase in water and wastewater projects due to Orchard Drive, Dundas Street East, and relining projects in 2021. Police capital, as noted earlier, is 55% or $782,000 lower due to completion of the new station. And $100,000 has been provided pursuant to the recent Myers Pier condition assessment. As the Parks and Recreation Master Plan is still in process, we have limited projects for 2021, but have included $375,000 for related design fees, which will allow some projects to get underway once the plan is approved by Council in the spring. We recently were advised that we are eligible for COVID-19 resiliency funding of $1.12 million. There are strict criteria applicable to this funding, and an application must be filed by January the 7th. Staff have developed a list of projects which will be identified later in this presentation. Consistent with prior years, the budget documents provided to you include the capital budget summary, justification sheets, covering reports, photos, and reserve fund schedules. The 2021 capital budget includes projects for all city departments and boards. Projects reflect council's priorities as outlined in the strategic plan and generally support our existing asset management plan. Projects included represent those with the highest priority and critical need. This slide provides a breakdown of the 2021 capital budget. Total budget is comprised of 85 projects totaling $36.1 million versus $39.4 million in 2020. 56, or the majority of projects, are asset management related, major repairs, reconstruction, or rehabilitation to bring existing assets to their original service level. 6 projects represent the continuation of previously approved projects and are subsequent phases or additional funding required for projects which were initiated in earlier budgets. 2 projects will result in improved energy efficiency and lower operating costs. And 14 projects represent the purchase of new assets. Examples include the portable bleacher for MA Sills Park and the Belleville agricultural site development project. I noted that the project lists provided the departments were edited and modified as part of the review process. You've been provided with a list of proposed capital projects to be deferred to 2022. In the preparation of the capital budget and discussion with staff, we determined that in order to keep the budget to a manageable level, some projects could be deferred to future years. These projects may be considered the top priority for the 2022 capital budget. As part of the 2020 capital budget, Council approved funding to complete the Parks and Recreation Master Plan. Once the plan is completed, Council will be provided with project options to consider for 2021 and future years. The 2021 capital budget includes $375,000 in seed funding for projects derived from the plan. This funding should address design and other preliminary work required with full construction to be completed in 2022. We need to consider the capital, operating, and replacement costs for a new project in the context of our existing parks and recreation infrastructure. We continue to deal with the impact of the updated Ontario Construction Act in our ongoing capital project management. The OCA meant the city effectively had more projects which required comprehensive project management. Recognizing that additional resources were necessary to ensure compliance with the Act, Council approved the hire of 3 additional project managers as part of the 2020 operating budget. The 2021 capital budget highlights in pinks all projects which fall under the rules of the Construction Act. This graph provides a breakdown of the 2021 capital budget value by service or department. Just over 90% of the budget is core infrastructure, transportation 40%, water 20%, wastewater 15%, and facilities 14%. This slide provides a table and graph of budget by infrastructure category comparative to 2020. As noted earlier, in 2021, the balance of projects is more heavily weighted in water and wastewater and less in transportation. The 2021 capital budget is financed by a variety of funding sources which can be described as internal or external. Internal financing is derived from taxation, user fees, reserve funds, and long-term debt, and represents 76.84% of total funding. External financing comes in the form of grants, donations, and federal and provincial gas tax and represents 23.16%. Again, the heavy concentration on taxation and user fees puts pressure on our tax and user rates, which is going to intensify in future years. This is further emphasized as we examine the impact of the Wet Weather Master Plan and update the development charges background study. This slide shows the allocation of 2021 capital budget funding by source with slightly more detail than the previous chart. Taxation and user fees represent approximately 50% of the funds required for the 2021 budget. Casino funds contribute 1.78%, which is significantly less than the 2020 due to the impact of the COVID-19 on the local casino operation. This graph and table provide a breakdown of capital budget financing by source comparative with 2020. As previously noted, taxation provides a major source of funding for the city's capital program. The proposed funding from taxation for 2021 of $9.6 million is the same amount levied in 2020 and hence represents no increase in taxation for 2021. The $1 million contribution to the police facility will be utilized to reduce the debt required for the new facility, which is scheduled to be drawn in late 2021. Borrowing for the facility will be reduced by the accumulated contributions to the point of borrowing. The estimated debt draw for the facility is currently $17.4 million, which carries annual payments of approximately $920,000. The annual contribution shown on the slide will be replaced with debt charges once the debenture is processed. Water, wastewater, and parking are funded through user rates, which means that they are not subsidized by property taxes. For water and wastewater, capital funding is raised through user rates based on a long-term capital spending plan, which supports asset management. The degree of funding depends on the capital projects ready and proposed for consideration in any given year as shown in the table. Water and wastewater are both subject to provincial regulations, including those issued under the Municipal Act and the Safe Drinking Water Act. The Safe Drinking Water Act, Regulation 45307, requires water systems to file financial plans which prove they are independently financially sustainable. This was just recently completed in November. Financial sustainability means that they must be able to fund both operating and capital programs, and a similar regulation for wastewater utilities is pending. Included in your budget package behind the capital justification sheets is a summary of the city's current reserve funds. These funds are classified as discretionary or non-discretionary, being those required by regulation, and the following table provides examples of our discretionary and non-discretionary reserve funds, their purpose and source of funds. Non-discretionary reserve funds represent deferred revenue which has been segregated pursuant to certain regulations such as the Building Code Act or a funding agreement such as the federal gas or provincial gas tax. Reserve funds, including casino, represent 15.36% of total capital budget financing for 2021. Referring to the earlier slide, this 15.36% includes both casino and DC funding, which is placed in reserve when received. In 2020, our reserve fund allocation was $12.2 million, and in 2021, it's $5.5 million. This table provides a sample of the city's discretionary reserve funds. These funds have been created for a variety of services and established by bylaw. The funding source for these reserve varies. Many are funded from provisions established in the operating budget and funded by taxation. Others derive funds from donations or property sales. As noted, wastewater is funded from user fees, with the annual surplus allocated to funding future capital. OLG casino proceeds. The city continues to benefit financially from the OLG proceeds from the Shorelines Casino. Consistent with the city's policy for the use of OLG funding, the proceeds received are used in the capital budget in the year following receipt of the funds. Casino revenue will provide $643,000 towards the 2021 capital budget, which represents a significant drop from $2.8 million in 2020. The OLG casino funding shortfall was addressed in the Phase 2 Safe Restart application, but has been scrutinized by the Ministry, so we are presently not hopeful that the full shortfall will be considered. Our claim has currently been limited to 25% of our projected revenue losses, specifically for those areas serving operations. We have referred the issue to our provincial ministry partners for reconsideration. The current OLG annual proceeds policy permits the allocation of funds received for the prior year to current year capital and operating initiatives per the table shown. While part of the proceeds are strictly allocated to capital-related issues, others may be used to fund both capital and non-capital related expenditures such as economic development, social infrastructure, and disaster mitigation. This table details the projects financed in whole or in part by casino funding and the specific casino funding area. For example, Sydney Bridge intersection has been funded $200,000 from the infrastructure area of OLG funding, and a police vehicle has been partly funded by the vehicle allocation. The municipal accommodation tax is being proposed to finance 2 tourism supportive capital projects in 2021. This funding has been included with reserves on the capital summary. In 2020, we used casino funding for a couple of operating budget initiatives in 2021 being the BDIA Al Fresco and the Parks and Recreation Master Plan. Based on funding received to date and approved and proposed commitments, the estimated closing 2020 MAT revenue is estimated to be $122,000. First introduced in 2005, the federal gas tax provides annual infrastructure renewal funding for a variety of service areas, including roads, bridges, water, wastewater, recreation, and transit. The city received $3 million in 2020. Funding is expected to increase to $3.4 million by 2023. The city received special one-time federal gas tax payments in 2019 of $3.2 million, which was applied to a number of projects, hence the higher funding amount in 2020. As OSIF funding for 2021 has not been confirmed, federal gas tax is presently the only guaranteed and confirmed source of grant funding for municipal core infrastructure. In 2021, we're proposing to use federal gas tax to fund Orchard Drive and Alexander Street. Provincial gas tax is funding strictly dedicated to the improvement of transit service in Ontario. Created in 2004, the province funds the program by dedicating 2 of the current 14.7 cents in tax collected on every unleaded liter of gasoline sold in Ontario. Allocations are determined annually based 70% on CUDA transit ridership results and 30% on population. While the federal gas tax may only be applied to capital costs, the provincial gas tax will fund the initial costs associated with transit expansions such as new routes. Once the first year is completed, any future route costs must be financed by the municipality through user fares and taxes. While transit ridership has increased prior to COVID, based on the 2020 operating budget, approximately 70% of transit operations is financed through property taxation, which is area rated. This includes the cost for the complete transit service, including the mobility bus. The 2021 provincial gas tax has been estimated at $498,000 compared to $737,000 for 2020. The lower current projection is based on indications from the province through our transit associations that further allocations will be negatively impacted by COVID-19. The city continues to actively pursue all current external financing options, including government grants, to reduce the portion of capital investment allocated to our taxpayers. For 2021, we're applying grant funding of $4.3 million through the OSIF Formula Grant and COVID-19 Resiliency Fund. At the end of the presentation, I have provided details regarding a recent Rural Economic Development Fund announcement as well. The Ontario Community Infrastructure Fund was created in 2015. The initial program was 2-part. There was an application-based section which we applied for and were unsuccessful with, and a formula-based component. From 2015 through 2020, the city received $10.06 million in OSIF formula funding, which has been used to fund a variety of core infrastructure projects. The 2020 allocation was not confirmed by the province until after the 2020 capital budget was determined. For 2021, approximately $3.2 million is available to fund capital projects. Similar to other external financing like OLG casino proceeds, we only allocate funds to projects which have been earned to date. We're still waiting on official confirmation of OSIF funding for 2021, and any funding approved and received will be applied to fund 2022 projects. Intended to get shovel-ready projects underway sooner to effectively kickstart local economies, the COVID-19 Resiliency Fund is an 80% federal and 20% provincial funding initiative. The City of Belleville share has been announced at $1.12 million. This funding can be applied to 4 main categories: renovations to recreation centers, COVID-19 response infrastructure such as HVAC, new builds or renovations to enable physical distancing, active transportation, and disaster mitigation. Projects must be started no later than September 30th, 2021 and completed by December 31st, 2021. So there's a very short time frame for this funding, which made it challenging trying to find something that fitted the program. Staff have reviewed the program details and consulted the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing to confirm project eligibility. Based on this review, staff are proposing that the financing be allocated to a number of parks-related asset maintenance and upgrade projects which can be completed in compliance with the program requirements and timelines. These projects focus on improvements to existing infrastructure as opposed to new initiatives in advance of the completion and approval of the Parks and Recreation Master Plan. So this slide basically shows all of the projects that staff are recommending this funding be applied to. So it includes the Thurlow Dog Park and improvements to Cascade Park, Hague Park, Stanley Parkette, Bird Park, and M.A. Sills Park. The citywide development charge expires in 2021, and the draft background study is available online for review and comment. The public meeting is scheduled for December the 14th. The Stanley Park bylaw was renewed in 2020 and expires in 2025. Each background study highlights a list of development-related projects which can be partially funded by DCs. DCs are collected and applied to fund the related capital project when presented. The amount collected is dependent on the level and type of construction activity in any given year. To date, the city has collected $2.8 million in development charges in 2020 as compared to $3.2 million in 2019 and $2.3 million in 2018, those being annual totals. This amount collected is dependent on the level and type of construction activity in any given year. The city can use development charges as funding for projects specified in a current or previously approved background study. Projects financed in part by development charges in 2021 are shown in the table provided. These include the Cindy Street, Bridge Street intersection, Dundas Street West sidewalk, the Avonlow Sewage Pumping Station, and the Tracy Street, Folly Street wastewater oversizing project. Following council approval, capital projects are established for each issue and the expenditure tracking begins. Some projects can take over a year to complete. We currently have 255 active projects with only 88 more than 60% complete to the end of October. Capital project reports are prepared monthly, and council is provided with a summary on a quarterly basis. Finance Committee reviews year-end report and makes recommendations to council to effectively close projects and address any over or under expenditures consistent with our budget and financial controls policy. Recommendations are addressed by council at the same time as our audited financial statements. The debt policy was upgraded earlier this year to permit borrowing for periods of 25 years or less, depending on the estimated life of the infrastructure being financed. Each year, the Ministry of Finance issues an annual debt repayment limit notice to every municipality. For 2020, the maximum annual debt servicing cost for the City of Belleville is 25% of our operating revenue, or $37.2 million. To protect our credit and ensure our financial sustainability, the city's debt policy maintains an annual maximum of 12% of operating revenue. For 2020, this would approximate $17.9 million. The debt policy was updated earlier this year to permit borrowing for periods of 25 years or less, depending on the estimated life of the infrastructure being financed. We recently issued 3 debentures for a total of $19.7 million with Infrastructure Ontario. For 2021, debt is being recommended as financing for Herkimer Avenue, as the original project was debt financed, and the Belleville Agricultural Society relocation. With respect to the Belleville Agricultural Society project, we're planning to use temporary construction financing through Infrastructure Ontario initially. The proceeds from any land sales or similar funding can then be applied to the loan with a final debenture issued for the net amount. Based on the current 25-year borrowing rate of 2.3%, the annual payment for each $1 million borrowed is $52,800. This table provides a schedule of debt issued for 2021 through and including 2024. Projects recommended for debt financing which has yet to be issued include Mineral and Maitland, the police station, Northeast Industrial Park, Sydney Street Corridor, and Herkimer Avenue at $6.8 million. One of the largest ones remaining to be issued, which is the timing of which is rather uncertain, is the wastewater treatment plant upgrades at $10.8 million. And that will largely depend on when the project becomes ready. So 2024 for that one is an estimate. This table summarizes the city's debt servicing costs for the forecast period 2020 to 2026. At the end of 2026, the debt servicing ratio is estimated to be 7.9%. This is based on our current operating revenue. As revenue increases over the forecast time period, the debt servicing ratio shown on the slide will reduce. This table reflects the last major borrowing forecasted for the rehabilitation of the wastewater treatment facility as previously mentioned in 2024. As the city's revenue will increase over time, our ADRL will also increase. With future debt issuances considered, this table summarizes the city's outstanding debt for the period 2020 to 2026 and provides a breakdown of tax and user rate funded debt. These calculations are based on a 25-year repayment term in accordance with our debt policy. Outstanding debt will increase from $119.2 million at the end of 2020 to $135.9 million at the end of 2026. With future debt issuances considered, this graph depicts the shift in debt for the city from 2013 to 2026. As you can see, outstanding debt peaks at $154.1 million in 2024 and reduces to $135.8 million at the end of 2026. So we frequently ask ourselves what the relationship is between the operating and capital budget. So they're related in a number of ways. The first is direct funding from the operating budget for annual capital is provided. So we currently raise approximately $6 million annually through taxation and $11.5 million from user rates to directly fund our capital program. The debt servicing costs have to be added to the operating budget and raised through taxes or user fees. Operating costs are also affected. While some projects reduce operating costs, many increase costs, particularly if service levels are increased. We attempt to keep funding relatively constant from year to year to prevent major fluctuations in tax rates. So as noted, some things increase costs. New infrastructure means new operating costs, such as fuel, energy, staffing, and maintenance, which all have to be funded through the operating budget. So Council's reminded that while external financing is often available to finance the acquisition of infrastructure, the ongoing operating costs are the responsibility of the municipality and impact taxation and user fees. So based on the report dated May 2014 prepared by Dillon Consulting, the city should allocate at least $23 million to ensure sustainability of its assets. The definition of asset management is the coordinated activity of an organization to realize value from its assets. To assist municipalities in making good capital investment decisions, in 2011, the province introduced the Building Together, a long-term infrastructure plan. In response to a message delivered in the province's plan, the city contracted our first asset management plan in 2014. This document covered all of the city's major assets, as noted in the slide, and concluded that the replacement value was well over $1 billion, which is most likely conservative. It recommended that at the very minimum, the city implement a 2% or $23 million investment to address asset management. It should be noted that the $23 million only addressed existing assets, and the city has also heavily invested in new infrastructure since 2014. In addition to the basic investment of $23 million, the city also identified a backlog of overdue repairs of over $175 million, which we have been making significant efforts to address in recent years, as illustrated in this table. Capital budgets have been tracking much higher than the levels prescribed in the asset management plan. Following the preparation of the asset management policy in 2019, next steps are, by July 1st of 2021, the preparation of a revised asset management plan for all core assets, roads, bridges, water, wastewater, and stormwater is required, including an inventory of assets, current levels of service, and costs to maintain levels of service. This is currently underway and has been assigned to GHD Consulting. By July 1st, 2023, the asset management plan must be enhanced to include all assets, i.e. buildings, fleet, and equipment. By July 1st, 2024, the plan must include proposed levels of service, life cycle management, and a financial strategy. Once phase 3 of the plan is completed in 2024, the plan must be updated every year. In December 2017, Ontario Regulation 58817, Asset Management Planning for Municipal Infrastructure was issued. The first step in the process was the creation of a strategic asset management policy, as was just noted. The next step is the completion of the Asset Management Plan update, which will feature asset management approaches and decisions which will highly influence future capital budgets. For municipal governments, value is created by delivering services at an appropriate cost while managing long-term risks. This requires coordination across all service areas and an integrated and long-term approach. So we have a number of next steps. In an earlier slide, staff provided recommended projects for consideration for the $1.12 million COVID-19 Resiliency Fund. Applications will be prepared and submitted by January the 7th. Completion of the Parks and Recreation Master Plan will lead to some projects moving forward in 2021 and a defined approach for related capital improvements in future years. The DC background study has a comprehensive list of projects for partial funding through Ds, and there's a significant upward pressure on DC rates as well as user rates as these projects are anticipated. The wet water master plan anticipates spending on wastewater treatment of $120 million over the next 40 years. This, combined with the impact of the proposed DC background study, will put strong upward pressure on wastewater rates. Revised water and wastewater rates will be provided to Council for January 1st, 2021 implementation on December the 14th. The asset management and sustainability requires the effort of staff and Council, and related planning will be a major focus as the updated asset management plan is updated. We have become increasingly concerned about the availability of infrastructure condition data, which is critical for capital planning. While the asset management plan will address this at a higher level, staff are recommending that detailed condition assessments be carried out starting in 2021 for our facilities, including water treatment. This information is absolutely critical for effective capital budgeting in the future. Enhanced reserve provisions for asset management need to be established in the operating budget, closely aligned with the updated asset management plan. While no additional funds were requested in the 2021 budget due to COVID-19 pressures, we'll be submitting a request in the 2021 operating budget to increase the contribution to various asset-related reserves in accordance with the asset management plan. Availability of external financing going forward is a major concern and will put major pressure on taxes and user fees. We need to continue to lobby both the federal and provincial governments for more infrastructure funding. Council is challenged with making wise decisions which ensure the best use of the funding we have available to us and minimal debt. So as I noted earlier in my presentation, we just recently got information from MPP Cramp's office on the RED program, or Rural Economic Development Fund. So there are two streams which have been announced recently. Typically, this funding has funded more operating type initiatives, but this time they've actually included an infrastructure stream, so we can actually apply for funding to provide some assistance for some of our capital projects as well. So the funding for capital is 30%, so the municipality is required to contribute 70%. And we have a number of projects within the current capital budget which might be good candidates for the funding, including some improvements to the City Hall Mansard facade, trail improvements, and Myers Pier Dock B. So we'll be getting together with staff and coming up with a plan to determine our best approach for the application for the use of this funding. So this concludes my presentation. If you have any questions.
Thank you very much, Director Hines, and thank you for you and all your staff for what you've done to bring the budget to us today. You know, in my time on council, we've always had some items that we were waiting not authorization, but waiting finalization from the provincial or federal governments in terms of some projects. But certainly since March, it is unprecedented the amounts of information that we are lacking, and yet we have to go through our own process to set budgets and to move forward. And you know, it's unlikely that's going to change for the next little while. So, you know, you've had to make a number of assumptions which may be revised. I think Council, we understand that and we appreciate it. We may have to re-examine some of these items when we find that funds we were counting on may not be available, but also that we weren't counting on or didn't count in becomes available. And we are all looking forward to a time when there's a little bit more predictability like there was before. So I'll say thank you for that. And I'll open it up to colleagues. Anyone have any questions for Director Hines on this? Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Worship, through you, and thank you, Carol, for your presentation.
Director Hines.
Director Hines, a couple of questions for you. User fees for water and wastewater went up significantly in the budget from last year to this year. I know that in our operating budget, we passed a 0% increase. Do we have any reason that that's up so significantly?
The last increase for water and wastewater was actually in May of 2019. So we haven't had an increase post-COVID. We haven't addressed rates post-COVID yet. We'll be addressing them in December. And so the reason there's a heavy, I had this conversation earlier with someone else, and there's a heavier concentration of user rate funded projects in the budget this year, and that's just timing. Some years where the budget's more heavily weighted towards transportation, other years it's more heavily weighted towards water and wastewater. We've got Alexander Street and Orchard Drive, they're both very heavily weighted towards water and wastewater, so we're drawing more from those reserves because we're doing more water and wastewater work in 2021. So, but there will be new rates coming to council on December the 14th.
Okay, and in terms of those, and I think we had those reserve numbers, we're still, I know that because we have some numbers coming for increase, and I know that the developmental charges is the other one I'm going to get to coming very shortly. We have reserves on this, and I guess my main question is, are we growing enough of a city? Do we have enough homes being built, users coming on that pay for this? I know that there's just a tremendous amount of assets we need to be replacing. We don't have any of that money. Is in your opinion, we're growing enough, or do we need to see more growth for the city in order to start paying for some of this?
I think you'll see great details on, if you go through the background study, and certainly at the public meeting on the 14th, you'll get great information on what our prediction is for growth. Certainly growth helps, it brings in assessment, it puts, relieves pressure on our tax rates, but at the same time, it also increases demand for services, both operating and capital related. So, I'm not really in a position to determine whether our growth levels are adequate. I guess, like everything else, they are what they are. So, we're happy to see the effects of development, and certainly particularly in terms of our assessment overall. And we've had some substantial development in the last few years, which we've been very happy about. So.
Okay. My last question's on reserve funds. I know that we have the casino reserve funds, and then we have MAT. Both are not performing at which they would normally perform at. So in terms of using these funds this year, is there any concern that when it comes to 2022's capital budget that we're going to be in some problems, or concerns on your end that we're going to have some issues to deal with shortly, or what are your thoughts on that?
So we've been very cautious in the allocation of both of those types of funding because of the pressures on those organizations. So, certainly we've taken the policy where we don't apply anything to the budget unless we've earned it. We've taken a hit this year. Like obviously last year we were using $2.8 million of casino funding to fund capital. This year we've only got $600,000 in change. So we just have to roll with the flow. We're hoping that, as the vaccine is introduced and as the economy recovers, that those facilities will, see recovery as well, and that we'll see better revenue streams from those. So we're very cautious, though, to make sure that we're only spending what we've already got in the bank. Okay.
And last question, I know that I've talked to you personally. We don't have a MAT policy yet. We were supposed to, and through COVID we haven't. But when it comes to MAT, and I know the decisions to spend that money, did any of the economic development staff have any input on how that was spent? Or were they given any, through the EMT, any ability to comment on those expenditures?
I don't believe those projects are their responsibility, so they probably were not consulted.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Just if I could just follow up on a couple of things, because I think there is some confusion in the community, and Councillor Williams asked a question regarding our tax rate, and then in relation to the water and wastewater charges. Perhaps can you just explain for our benefit again how we fund water and wastewater, and whether or not tax dollars, so tax supported projects, come through the city's main levy?
So as noted in the presentation, water and wastewater are funded by user rates, as is parking, and so we're very careful to make sure that any operating initiatives or capital initiatives are funded strictly from user rates. So there's no subsidization that takes place from taxation at all. That's actually forbidden. So we're very careful to make sure that whatever we're budgeting for water and wastewater, that we have the money available to fund those projects from those rates. It is putting a lot of pressure on, a lot of the projects are putting pressure on those rates, and it will continue as we see future years. It's a challenge. We've been rather aggressive with our water and wastewater rates in the past, particularly on the water rates. That happened a number of years ago as we separated the water utility when we went through deregulation of the electric industry, and the water utility was spun out on its own. So our rates are in fairly good shape. They're somewhat higher than other municipalities, but they're not the highest in the province. And we're very cautious. We're to make sure that we're considering the customer impact when we do a rate review. And certainly, 0% only applied to taxation. And again, the last time that we had a water and wastewater increase was pre-COVID in 2019. It was around 3% and change. Yeah.
So just to be clear, whether we had a tax increase last year or not, that has absolutely nothing to do with the wastewater rates.
That is
Those
correct.
are because there are a number of taxpayers in the city that don't have water service, either potable water or sanitary. So they don't pay anything towards the water system. Yeah. And so what user fees and the allocation of development charges is what covers that service.
That's correct.
And that's where, for example, the development charge report that's come up with some significant increases. It's because of the future requirements for us to invest in our water and wastewater system.
That's correct.
And so that's where we're trying to find that equilibrium or that fine line to balance that. But tax dollars that are paid for will not be going to our water and wastewater system.
That is correct.
It's, again, I know that sometimes the public looks at us and says, well, a dollar's a dollar. What are you talking about? You're still spending our money. But we are very restricted in how we do this. Councillor Thompson and I were talking about this before the meeting today, about the fact that, there are many times where we would like to do something and we don't like the means that we have, but we don't have options.
That's correct.
So we have to do what we can do to make things progress.
The rules are there for a good reason. I mean, it all came out of Walkerton many, many years ago that they wanted to make sure that municipal water and wastewater systems were self-sustaining. The focus has been primarily on water in terms of those regulations. I'm sure Perry will tell you there's likely more regulations to come. In terms of rates, the pressure is really more on the wastewater side going forward than it is on the water side.
Yes.
So.
Okay, great. Councillor Stannison.
Thank you, Your Worship. So just some comments. The Finance Committee had the opportunity to review this budget package ahead of time, so it's myself, Councillor Thompson, and Mayor Panchuk. And I think even though this is a capital budget, I think it's worth just spending a minute talking about the operating budget for 2020 and the action that Council took to cushion the impact of COVID-19 on the community. So we had free public transit, we had free parking, free garbage collection, we deferred taxes, and overall, when we set the final budget, there was a slight reduction overall. And the reason I mention that is it's really important when we look at the capital investment that we put in infrastructure. We didn't slow down last year, or this year. We invested, as Director Hines pointed out, some $39 million. And so this particular budget that we've got in front of us is a pragmatic budget that focuses on much needed investment in water and wastewater. And about a third of our budget, the $36 million, is dealing with those two entities. Further, and some of this might be repetitive, our roads needs study is driving another $3 million into rehab and resurfacing, and the lion's share of that is occurring in Ward 2. So just to name a few, we've got Canifton, Mudcat, Bethel Road, Bronk Road, and Ashley. And there are also two separate line items in there for design work. We've got the major construction of Old Highway 2 from Hague Road to Point Anne. that was brought forward by Councillor Carr. And we've also got the design work for Phillipston Road that I brought forward the year previous. As Director Hines stated, the Sydney Street improvements from north of the 401 up to Vermilion have been deferred to next year, and basically that's something that we're going to be doing jointly with Quinte West when they're ready, as it's covered by the road sharing agreement. We've got the expected vehicle and hardware replacement and ongoing support for parks and recreation that will be guided by the Parks and Recreation Master Plan, and that is coming forward in the new year. Pop-ups are back, and they've become a standard fare in the budget, and there's also a new dog park to consider for Ward 2. And again, as mentioned, we just received notification that the Rural Economic Development Program has announced 2 streams, the Economic Diversification and Competitive Stream and the Strategic Economic Infrastructure, and the applications are to be submitted by February the 1st. So in closing, our executive management team have prepared an aggressive budget in keeping with our fast-growing city, and finance have assured it's financially prudent. It addresses the ongoing asset management required for our city, and I want to thank them all for positioning us for success in 2021 with this capital budget. I look forward to the discussion and the decision of council. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sanderson. Thank you for your work as chair of the Finance Committee. The other member of the Finance Committee, Councillor Thompson, I'll recognize you now.
Thank you very much. I didn't realize Councillor Sanderson was going to sum it up, or I would have asked this question earlier. I got a couple of questions, and then I guess I would be remiss if I didn't talk about the water and wastewater. When we bring that forward, or when you bring that forward, will you bring comparisons to other municipalities on their rates so that the public can see that we're not way out of line?
Absolutely.
And I realize I met with you and Brandon, I know Brandon, about the water and sewer rates. I know we didn't increase it this year, and I know we have to look at the future, but again, the old story is one taxpayer, one payment. So I look forward to a more detailed on this water and user rate in November. The casino percentages, I keep getting asked, when we get 5.25 and 4%, is that on the gross or on the profit?
That's on the proceeds. So that's whatever they take in. So that's based on their revenue. It's not on their net.
Okay, good.
Yep.
Fine, I can finally ask that.
It's interesting.
Yes, it is. Very interesting. And there's a couple of things I'm going to talk about when we get into the budget. One's on the reserve fund and one's on the dog park funding. But the projects, it's interesting. You say we got 255 projects, 88 more, and 60% of all of them are completed at this stage? Of the 255 plus the 88?
There's only there's 66% that are completed to the end of October.
Of all those two totals?
Of all those projects. But, I'll caution a couple of things. One is, some projects are meant to take more than 1 year, like we
Yes.
do planning, we,
Yep.
get started in 1 year, and
I
we
can
complete it
agree.
in the second year, sometimes third year, sometimes longer than that. And then there's typically, in terms of more simpler or more straightforward projects, sometimes a lot can happen in the last 4 months of the year as
Yep.
well. So, I guess my best advice is to stay tuned. You'll probably see a big difference when we go to close the projects out at the end of December. A lot more of them will be complete than are currently done. But it just highlights the nature of our projects and the timing that goes with
And the
them.
last
So-
question, on the RED funding, do we know how much, have we found out from the government what the total amount they're allocating?
There is no allocation. It's application-based for both streams. So on the infrastructure side, I believe their maximum contribution is $250,000. and that's 30% of a project. So it's roughly, that means we have a project that we could put forward for $800,000 and change roughly to maximize that funding. But
So we're only allowed to application for one project or many projects?
there's two streams we can apply under both stream.
For one, under
One
each one?
project in each stream. So the first one first stream is operating.
Yep.
So it would be an economic development, operational related activity. And then the second one is infrastructure. And so that would be improvements to some of our city infrastructure. And the maximum funding available from the program for infrastructure is $250,000, and that represents 30% of the eligible project cost.
So have they set a budget for those fundings? Like, is there 10 million or 5 million? Or?
Yeah, I don't have that information
Okay.
available presently.
All right. And being on the committee, I want to thank Carol and all the finance committee members, staff rather, for a job well done. It's very clear, and when you look at it, it's a tough job, and I appreciate what all the staff have done, and I look forward to discussing the budget. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Anyone else? Councillor Millette.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Director Hines and Councillor Thompson, my colleague, asked the question regarding the last item, red funding, and just the examples. Now, I know there are examples of where we could spend this. Do we know if we're successful in this, what those funding totals might be? It may be too much of a breakdown to have
Yeah,
at your
we
fingertips.
just got the information. So as I say, we can apply under both streams. The maximum project that you could submit for infrastructure, I think, is $833,000 because they'll only fund up to $250,000 as
Okay.
30%. So those are suggestions. But bearing in mind that whatever project we do present, if it's something outside of the budget, we have to fund 70% of it ourselves. So.
Okay, thank you very much.
And just
Thank you.
Councillor Millette on that, I was Friday afternoon that I received the information from MPP Cramp regarding this, and so I forwarded it to Director Hines and to Deputy Treasurer Ferguson and Mr. Bove. But this is the way it's been this whole year. Like we're finding out that this is available or this is not available, and that's why. It's never easy in the best of times, but this year it's been, I don't want to say impossible, but my goodness, I think treasurers all through the world are really struggling with it because they like to give us information that's complete. They don't like giving us a guess. And I've had a number of conversations with Director Hines where I'm asking her, okay, what do you think? And she doesn't want to have to think something. She wants to know. She wants to give us that, but they're doing their very best. So.
Yeah, and that was why my question was she may not, and again, a lot of it's speculative, but again, it's from where we sit, if these funds are successful, they could positively impact our budget, and that's, I guess, where you get a little giddy when you find out that there may be some goodies in the stocking, so thank you.
And yesterday's fiscal update that the federal government made is also promising a lot of resources that we'll be able to use. We're just waiting for those details. All right, Councillor Carr.
Thank you. Just a question on process. According to the city's website, the Finance Committee last met on the 18th of September, and that was to review the capital meeting timeline and then the dates for the budget. Did the committee meet? Now, listening to the chair, he said that the committee reviewed the budget in advance. Was there any committee meetings in relation to that? I don't see anything on the city's website of any record. And did the committee provide any recommendations to staff regarding the draft budget?
The answer is yes and yes. Can you give the dates, Councillor Sanderson, about the last time the committee had met with the EMT?
So there wasn't a meeting of the Finance Committee. We were invited, the Finance Committee was invited to a working meeting of the executive management team. The Finance Committee is actually going to have its next meeting, I believe it's December the 10th.
Right.
So it was a working meeting.
So if I could, so then the review of the budget, it was just a review, there was no direction provided to staff?
We provided input, but there was no direction that was provided. There were no resolutions passed by the Finance Committee.
Okay, thank you.
All right, anyone else? Any final comments, Director Hines, before we get into the details?
I think I'm ready to go.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much. And so there is I need a resolution that the 2021 capital budget presentation be received. Moved by Councillor Sanderson, seconded by Councillor McCaw. All in favor, it's carried. Now, speaking of revisions throughout the year, I'm going to sort of revise the timeline that I provided earlier. I do believe that we will be back from our in-camera by 11 o'clock. And then we'll pick it up at 11 o'clock with item 8B1, and we'll get into it for approximately an hour. I anticipate that we will take a break around noon for lunch, and then come back at 12:45. So just for members of the media that are watching on our YouTube streaming channel, are here in the audience to give everyone an idea of that. So I am going to declare a brief recess so that we can move in camera. Mr. McDonald, we need a motion to move in camera for us to consider items permitted under the Municipal Act dealing with property. All right, so that's the motion would be to go in camera, deal with items dealing with property, moved by Councillor Thompson, seconded by Councillor Carr. All in favor, it's carried, and we'll be back around 11 o'clock. Thank you.
Where are we meeting?
Sir Mackenzie.
Sir Mackenzie.
Third floor, thank you. All right, we're actually a little bit early, but let's get going at it. So we will now move to consent items and item 8B1. And so I'm going to get a resolution on the floor that capital issues number 1 through 1.085 inclusive be approved. Moved by Councillor Sandison, seconded by Councillor Thompson. All right, colleagues, so you have the package that was sent out by Carol. There is the summary, the 2021 capital budget summary sheet with all of the items in terms of the description, the budget, the proposed financing, as well as individual budget justification sheets. And so, how do we want to proceed with this? So we have people that want to raise individual items to have it, or do we want to have a opportunity for questions on them? The process would be, if we want changes, there'll be an amendment to add it, to add to it, or to delete the item. That would be the process that we would follow. There'd be an amendment. If it was seconded, it would be up for discussion. But I'm assuming that not all items are of concern. So I'm looking for some direction from council in terms of how we want to proceed with them. Councillor Thompson?
I would prefer that if we go around the table and ask if any councillors got anything they would like to pull specifically.
Okay.
And
that
would
seemed
be
to work well before, so.
Yeah.
All right, everyone agrees. I'll go around the table. So, Councillor Kelly, do you have any items that you want to pull for individual consideration?
No, thank you.
Councillor Carr.
No, thank you.
Councillor Sandison.
No, thank you.
Councillor Thompson.
Just the one on the dog park. I just want to get some clarifications on the dog park, and I got concerned with the location, but because it's tied to
So that's
funding.
item number 1.059. Okay, so we got that. Anything else? Any other ones? No, okay. No problem. Okay. Councillor McCaw?
Not necessarily with items, but I did want to, when we come to the end, add something to the budget. So is that the time to bring that up now? Or would you want?
Can you give us a hint?
Want me to just tell you right now?
Sure.
And give you a number for it?
Yeah.
All right. Let me see where we're at. Does it have to actually go under the Department of Recreation? Does that matter where it goes?
Well, why don't you talk about
Okay.
the suggestion? So this would be item number 1.086, if approved. And what is it?
Okay, so I'd like to revisit the CN Tribute Monument at the Quinte Sports and Wellness Center. I'm sure.
Okay. So let's bring it up as an issue, and then you can ask questions, and then we can have a discussion, and it'll be a motion to amend at that point, and
Okay.
to include it, and then council can decide.
All right.
Okay.
So that's going to be added then? Am I understanding?
Well, you'll be able to discuss it, yes.
Yep, okay.
So,
So
okay.
let me know when. Thank you.
Councillor Millette.
Yes, item 1.060, please.
Okay. Councillor Williams.
Item 1.040 and item 1.060.
So 040 and 60. Okay, so let's go through them, starting with item number 1.040. Councillor Williams, what would you like to, sorry, Councillor?
Sorry, Your Worship. The one that I wanted to speak on was the dog park, which
Yes.
you said
1.059.
It's 1.060.
I'm sorry, 1.060.
Okay, thank
No,
you.
well, the 1.060 is the call-up monument and reflection courtyard. I have 1.059 as the Thurlow Ward Dog Park.
Sorry, I'm looking at the wrong one, sorry.
Okay, am I, but we will talk about the dog park, okay?
Yep.
For sure, whatever number it is. So 1.040 is the portable bleacher for $90,000. Councillor Williams, you want to amend it?
Yeah, I'm going to discuss it, and then I'll probably make an amendment. So I'll have some questions, I'm sure, for staff first.
Okay.
So first of all, this one and the next one I'm speaking to have to deal with it being used from Matt. I know that in capital budget in 2020, I raised the same concerns, and from that, we were developing a policy for Matt that staff have through COVID have not been able to finish. However, through the EDDC and dealing with Matt, this is a very capable committee with a lot of great individuals who put a lot of hours. This year, we completed the EDDC strategic plan as well as the COVID-19 recovery plan, all of which we're looking at how do we tackle the challenges we're finding through COVID in the city, especially where it relates to economic development. And we know a couple things this year. Number one, Matt is depleted significantly. Like the casino, we're down over 50% of where we'd like to be. And number two, we have some businesses in two sectors that we've been speaking to in the last 2 months that are facing significant challenges. Number one is retail, and the other is restaurant. That committee has put through motions. They did put through motions in June that asked for some of that MAT to be spent. That did not end up on the operational budget. Somehow got dropped at the Finance Committee. And now there's been 2 other motions made at that committee and staff are bringing those to the December 14th council meeting. One is to assist the restaurant industry as it faces significant challenges, and we've heard that through COVID, and I know that our deputation by Mr. Ainsley was significant in noting those. And the second is retail, specifically the Quinte Mall right now is facing really big challenges in terms of retail retention and attraction. And again, these are economic development
So, Councillor
issues.
Williams,
Sorry, can I finish this?
Councillor Williams, I'm the chair. So when I want to ask a question and interrupt you, you'll stop, please. Okay? So you're bringing up issues with retailers where some of us may have pecuniary interest is something that I would make you aware of. We're dealing right now with this item in terms of the funding, and I can appreciate that you have other things you want to consider, but I won't entertain it if it's going to push people into pecuniary interest. So if you want to speak about the portable bleachers and the $90,000 and the source of the funding, please do so. Otherwise, I'll rule that out of order.
I was asking for a vote, so, or discussion.
I'll rule it out of order if you're going to have the discussion,
This is
because
public
if the
knowledge.
discussion is coming up and there are people who have pecuniary interest, they'll have to declare it and leave the meeting for the
We're
discussion.
not voting on those issues, but I'll continue if I can.
It's not just about voting on the issue, Councillor Williams, it's also the discussion and that councillors had today. They issued statements whether or not they have a pecuniary interest. You're now having
This is public knowledge. I'm not discussing any
You're now bringing
confidential.
up an item under discussion which would drag people into a pecuniary interest.
No.
So we're talking about the bleachers and we're talking about the $90,000.
Thank you. Can I continue?
Yes.
Thank you very much. So in this committee, of course, these are issues we've dealt with and we've passed motions on to come to council. What the money that money will be used for when it does discuss those issues is the MAT. MAT's depleted this year. Every bit counts, every single bit of it. And it won't have to help this account to be depleted further. So having items, and we have 2 of them on this budget that deplete the MAT to a point where when we look from a committee and from a council and from a city in being able to help industries, and I'm talking about retail and restaurants affected by COVID, we will not have the money to do so. So when I look at this item as bleachers, and if I was going to look at it, 1 as a chair of EDDC and MAT dollars, 2 if I'm going to look at it as a council member, and 3 as a committee member, and looking and speaking on behalf and listening to my committee members, not one of those committee members would see that as a priority during COVID-19 and during our budget spend. The problem with the bleacher spend right now with MAT is that it doesn't fit any of our strategic directions for the EDDC strategic plan, nor does it fit the COVID-19 recovery plan initiatives. Number 3, I would argue right now, is that we don't have sports, so no fans, and therefore no need for the bleachers. What I'm going, and I've already asked my questions to staff, so I'll just discuss with the amendment I'm looking to, but I'm going to ask staff beforehand. Where I see this fitting, if we're going to keep this in the budget, is in the casino fund for economic development, which would fit strategic directions. And for strategic direction, I assume, because staff were never asked about this issue or this item, would be that this would help sports, tourism, or events capacity and comfort if a bleacher, and therefore this would be an item warranted under economic development. But as it stands for MAT right now, it's not a tourism attraction. No one has ever visited a city because there's a bleacher. in terms of having a product that during COVID would help industry or restaurants or anything in the area. A bleacher will not help that. And at this point, I do not feel that MAT is the appropriate funding source of which this would come from. I'm going to ask a question to staff through you to Director Hines. Would the bleachers fit this $90,000 under the casino funding reserves for economic development?
Director Hines.
Through the chair to Councillor Williams, that is an alternative source of funding.
Okay, thank you. So I'll just make that amendment now, if I can, for that fund, that it be switched from the MAT source of funding to the Casino Reserve Fund for Economic Development.
Okay, so Councillor Williams has made that amendment. Is there a seconder? Councillor Millette. Discussion on the amendment. Councillor Sandison.
Thank you, Your Worship. So I need to ask Councillor Williams for some clarification. He made a comment in his speech that the Finance Committee had dropped something. So if you could maybe just elaborate on that for the Finance Committee.
June, before the actual budget, the operation budget came, there were two motions that came from the EDC, and you have the minutes. They were public minutes. And they never made it to the budget. According to my question from Councillor Thompson, who sits on the Finance Committee, those items came to the Finance Committee and were voted down. That's fine.
If they were voted down, they weren't dropped. They were dealt with in committee. You made it sound like we had dropped the ball on it. Okay, thank you for that.
Well, they were voted down in committee. I think that's
fine.
So Councillor Sandison, just to further clarify, because not everybody was there, those resolutions were for using MAT funds towards staff positions, which is not our practice for either the MAT funds or for the casino funds to use them for positions. Furthermore, it was not the first attempt to have staff positions filled or funded through the MAT funds. It had gone to the executive management team process and wasn't approved at that point. So you know, that was on the operating budget side, and you know, there's, I think, some confusion on that, but that was what that's what Councillor Williams was referring to.
Sure. As chair of the EDDC committee, Councillor Williams should have been aware of that. In terms of moving it out of MAT tax, the comment about you know, bleachers don't attract people to our area is a bit obtuse. This council received a presentation from I believe it was the Skyhawks football team, junior football team. And, you know, there was a lot of excitement about having a new franchise and sort of putting Belleville on the mark. And we had a big discussion about Mary Ann Sills Park and some of the improvements that we needed for that park. And certainly the bleachers are part of that. So while we have all been impacted by COVID in 2020, there's no reason to believe that investing in bleachers and using the MAT tax, for which it, if you heard Director Hines' presentation, it's applicable. It's an applicable use of those funds, and so I don't support moving it. I support where it is. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kelly.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, just some comments on this. I just wonder if we're splitting hairs here over which account it comes out of. And do we know what we spent last year, Director Hines, on MAT spending, even in this bizarre year of COVID-19?
There is a breakdown in
Your microphone, please. Your mic. Thank you.
Sorry, through the chair, there is a breakdown in my presentation. We have not used MAT funding previously for capital. It was proposed, but the item proposed was removed from the budget for 2020.
All right, thank you. Just a couple comments too.
Sorry, but that was it was a capital item in terms of the fence repairs at Glanmore House, and then it wasn't.
It was removed.
It was removed, so they didn't go ahead with that project after council had approved it. Yeah. Thanks,
okay,
Councillor
thank
Kelly.
you. Just a couple of other things. I had the opportunity to be on the Economic Destinations Committee, and also vice chair of the Bay Quinte Regional Tourism Board. So I see this from both angles. And when Councillor Williams referred to the bleachers as no one comes to see bleachers, well, we do know the presentation with the Skyhawks football team. We know 3 years ago, Belleville hosted the CASA Championships, and I think it was over 5,000 students, 1,200 coaches, and people that put their bums in those bleachers are coming to see their son or daughter play sports, and that is tourism, outside of the box thinking. We know that soccer happens there. Last January, I was speaking with the Toronto Argonauts about using Marianne Sills Park as a training facility for 2 or 3 days. Due to COVID, that didn't happen, but the bleachers were part of it in the dressing room. There's an ongoing repairs or facelift for that particular place in the city, I believe anyway, and I just think that the bleachers are going to add a lot to that. And I've been there for many sports events, and they need those bleachers, and they need more there, because I think if it's there and we enhance it, we're going to be the drawing center for a big part of Ontario, because it's a 2.5, 3-hour drive from Ottawa and a 90-minute drive from Toronto. I just think we have to build that and build it up, because we already have a lot of things in place. So I think we're splitting hairs here. The way Director Hines and her team looked at this, and last week at the Bay Quinte Tourism, it was reported to us that the projection for 2019 in mat tax for area hotels was $70,000 this year. They told us last Thursday it's over $200,000 coming in because of the boom summer tourist destination for this area. The hotels have benefited. So I think we're going to be okay. I did check with the finance department. We're splitting hairs here, and there's going to be lots of MAT funding, I believe, for projects with restaurants and some of the ideas the economic team have come up with for 2021. So I'm good the way it is set up. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kelly. Councillor Millette and then Councillor Thompson.
Thank you. I seconded the motion, and I don't see it as splitting hairs. And anybody who thinks that the bleachers are threatened in any way if we decide another funding source, we just heard from Director Hines that it's absolutely applicable to use casino funds, and I'm looking at the policies for allocation of casino revenues. I don't know why everybody is so stuck on taking money from MAT and not using the casino funds. The casino funds would fund the infrastructure, and I'm in full agreement with Councillor Kelly. I mean, nobody uses that facility more than the Bulldogs in a busy summer, and we have provincial rugby exhibitions there. Absolutely, we need better facilities there. But again, I don't see it as a tourism-related issue, more so as a infrastructure issue that can be funded through casino funds. And yeah, it's great that we're going to have more money coming into the MAT because of the influx of hotel use this year. But again, are the businesses that can benefit from promotion, restaurants, even the Quinte Mall, I mean, as part of a destination.
Councillor Millette, I think you heard.
Yes, I'm sorry. Yes, Your Worship, I understand your concern there. But I'm just saying, the funding source itself, I believe, can quite easily be changed to the casino funding, and I see no reason not to leave the 90,000 in MAT for what MAT is intended. That's it, straight up.
Thank you very much. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you. With the funding, I can go either way, but what I'm concerned with, and again, this becomes almost a conflict where I have to be careful because I work downtown. I think in the future, we're going to need all the dollars we can get in the MAT funding to certainly promote the area for retail, because if we go into a heavy second wave, it's going to be a disaster. So if we can save some of that money, that MAT funding, for promotion of our city, our businesses, our tourism, and still use the casino money for the bleachers. I don't dispute we need the bleachers. We got a beautiful facility. Why wouldn't we enhance it with some more bleachers to attract more people? But I'm concerned that with the COVIDs, if we don't be careful and we don't have money, and I think we're going to need a fair bit of money, MAT funding, to promote businesses in this area and get us back into square one, because we all know there's restaurants, retailers, tourism people that have been affected by the COVIDs. And if we can keep some of that money in the MAT for that in the future, we got a long road ahead of us yet that's going to take us into 21, 22 for recovery. And I think I'd like to see, say, that MAT funding in there. So I'm going to vote to switch the funding.
All right. Councillor Carr?
Thank you. You know, at the end of the day, we're talking about a small amount of money allocation when we're looking at the $35 million capital budget. I think the bigger fundamental issue here is what we want to do with funds for the city to target tourism infrastructure. And I made this point last term, and I think I've talked about it this term again. We fund the Bay Regional Marketing Board to promote the region and promote the city. The promotion isn't the issue, in my opinion. What I see is that we need to be investing and supporting entrepreneurs in new tourism infrastructure. And we saw a little bit of that with the pop-ups, but I think that's just a starting point of where we need to be. We need entrepreneurs to come in with new concepts from new tourist attractions. And so whether that's MAT or, and I'll pose this question in a minute, so I'll kind of, with the prelude, is it MAT funding that can be used for that, or is it casino economic development money that can be used for that? Because at the end of the day, that's where I see we have a gap in our city. Because we don't have enough investors from a tourist point of view coming in to say, how can we capitalize on the waterfront a little better? You know, we've talked about the fact that you know, the city getting an entrepreneur to come in and look at the possibility of a water park or go-karts or mini golf. We don't have any of that. And nor should the taxpayers be funding those type of initiatives. That's a private sector initiative. However, with our current financial state across the country, businesses are suffering, and as a result, people are trying to recalibrate and find a place in this, you know, kind of new economy, if you will. And I think that's something that the city needs to get behind and allow for some seed money to assist in pushing that forward. So I guess my question is, along that concept, can that be MAT money, or can that be casino economic development money?
Director Hines, do you understand the question?
Yes, and
Okay.
it could probably be either one.
Okay. So I guess, you know, I agree with the statement, though, too, is that buying bleachers, putting in a park bench, fixing a backstop, putting up goalposts for a football field, that's stuff that we have to maintain anyway. If, you know, we talked about the Skyhawks. If the end zone poles fall down tomorrow in a windstorm and bend, we've got to buy new ones and put them back up. If we have another piece of our infrastructure break down, we have to fix it as part of just capital maintenance. So I can't, you know, and I can't see where bleachers is an attraction. Does it support the infrastructure that attracts people? Sure. Does it, you know, and we're going to get into another one here in a moment, and I'll probably sound like a repetitive record here, but we have to think bigger when we talk about attracting people. And this here is just an infrastructure item. No different than if we're going to put in a new sidewalk in another part of the city. So I'm a little concerned that we're taking money that we should be allocating for the purpose of attracting tourism infrastructure, getting investors to come to the city so that we have that side of the house being taken care of while we have the marketing side already being done. And we're falling short on the infrastructure side. So we have to achieve that. So as far as I'm concerned, I don't think that adding the mat to a capital item, particularly adding to a athletic field, is a tourist attraction. The team is the attraction. This here is just adding to the infrastructure in order to facilitate different programs. So I think it would be best served if it was just simply a capital expenditure, and if it has to come through economic development, so be it. But I think it's no different than if we had to fix a playground equipment.
Thank you, Councillor Carr. I'm going to allow a second round on this because I'm hoping this will shorten the discussion we have when we get to the call-up memorial, because it's going to be basically the same talking points that people will be speaking to. So Councillor Williams and then Councillor Sanderson.
Thank you, through you. And I'm just going to get to the crux of the matter. I think we've been around it. The idea of this is that we have a committee, and Councillor Kelly, you talked about this a couple of times, it's splitting hairs. But we have a committee we put together with capable people who discuss how best to move the city forward, right? And you'll agree we've had some really good discussion on that, especially the last several months. The committee has had no input to these items. The committee has not approved them. And as vice chair, and you and I have talked about this beforehand, but several of the committee members have reached out to me, the chair, to say how they're disappointed they are that this spending is going through. One, without their input, and two, that they don't agree with that. So to me, I think if we want to go to the basis of this argument, when we have a little bit of money, again, like Councillor Carr said, 35 million in a capital budget, we're talking about 90,000 here, 110, we're talking about $200,000. And that committee has had no say, does not approve it. And at the end of the day, staff has had no say, does not approve it. Is it not then wrong, and should we not put it to the other funding source? That's really the crux here. At the end of the day, let's put this to the funding source. Let's go back to the committee, make sure that we've got things that staff want and the committee want, and then we're done. That's all my argument is. We're talking about splitting hairs or doing this. The idea is that we've had other staff and another committee have input to money that's supposed to be spent from this staff and this committee. That's it. Why don't we let them work? Why don't we let that committee make those recommendations as they've made motions, bring them to council and discuss that. That's as simple as this needs to be. Director Hines has already said this money can be spent out of the casino reserve fund. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Sanderson.
Thank you, through the chair. So a couple questions for Director Hines. In the formulation of the 2021 capital budget, were there any city departments excluded from participating in those discussions?
No, there were not.
Okay. Number two, were there any projects for fundamental infrastructure in support of economic development brought forward for the 2021 capital budget?
The pop-up shops extension would be an example.
So there was one?
Yes.
Okay, so we are fully supporting all the initiatives that are coming forward through the EDDC committee. Is that correct?
The pop-up shops that were brought forward by economic and strategic initiatives.
Okay, so similar to other committees where I would use transit as an example, where a couple of years back we saw the need for some buses, and we brought that forward to the team in terms of applying for funding. The economic development group is not being treated any differently than any other department in the city. Is that correct?
That is correct. I would assume that their initiatives are being brought forward through the economic and strategic initiatives.
Okay, so I guess just a comment then. So when we talk about thinking bigger, this council did think bigger, and that's why we formed the Economic Destination and Development Committee, and it's up to that committee to bring forward ideas to this council so that we can support the retail and all the other businesses that may need our assistance. And that's what's lacking. In terms of the plan, whether we fund it from MAT or casino revenue, I've heard people say, I don't know why we're having such a deliberation on it. Well, if that's the case, why don't we just leave it where it is? Finance put it here, assigned it to Matt. I trust their judgment, and I won't support moving it to casino.
Thank you. Councillor McCaw.
Thank you. And I don't know whether I need to say this or not, but maybe I need to just put it out there as a reminder. The Economic and Destination Development Committee does not make the decision as to what happens to MAT funds. They make recommendations, but it's council that makes that decision. So, I think maybe a reminder needed to go out in that regard. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Kelly, and then I'll have some concluding comments and we'll have the vote.
Through you, Mr. Chair, Director Hines, at the end of the day, why was the MAD funds decided to take the funds out of that cash?
I believe through our discussions through EMT, and it wasn't necessarily solely a finance department decision, through the discussions that we had as we formulated the budget, we felt that there was some credence to using that funding because there was a connection to tourism.
All right, thank you. I just want to follow up on Councillor Carr's comments. I agree about the bleachers being a capital issue and investing in city properties, but you have to go all the way, and this is a step in the right direction. This facility, as Councillor Millette touched on, is a going concern. Lots of things go on there. We talk about the Skyhawks football team, and when they present it to us, it's 4 games a year. So it's not the Skyhawks facility, and I think there's some mindset here that that's their football stadium. Well, they will be one of the, hopefully, many tenants in that facility. And it goes 365 days a year. Let's have some goals and shoot for 150 every second, third, fourth day. There's something going on there in the months that allot to it with more school programs. And, I'm at the point, and I believe it is splitting hairs, Councillor Williams, but I'm going to support the casino funding just so we can move this on. And I've had a change thanks to Councillor Carr and Williams. I just think I want to move on from this instead of going back and forth about it. Thank you.
All right, well, thank you. Well, the challenge we have here, right, and I think the number one issue that's being missed through all the discussion around the table today, in my opinion, is that while we're talking about $229,000 that the city has received this year, the Bay of Quinte Marketing, Regional Marketing Board has also received $229,000, and their job is to promote Belleville as a market to bring in visitors through advertising, but also to promote our region as somewhere for investment. So when we look at the money that the city retains, and all of us, including Councillor Kelly, who is on the Glenmore National Historic Site, when we look at the funds that we use, we were talking about investing them in an infrastructure. We were talking about the fact that we did not have enough tourism inventory of things for people to do when they came here. And so, when we talk about it splitting hairs, we are splitting hairs because there are people who want to take funds from the municipal accommodation tax and put them into non-capital items. But this was precisely the part of the reason why we wanted a municipal accommodation tax, was for us to invest in those capital items that would then serve as tourism attraction. Because the marketing side of it was not to be handled by the City of Belleville, it was to be handled by the Bay of Quinte Regional Marketing Board. And I know that from my reports from Councillor Kelly, they are doing very well. They have got excellent plans. They are pushing and they are encouraging and they're ready to go once we can reopen safely, once COVID has passed. They have a strategy for marketing and tourism and advertising, which will be very, very strong. The process that which we go through at the City of Belleville is that there are projects that are identified for the capital budget. And a number of different departments bring forth these ideas, and they go to the EMT, and EMT decides which ones will go forward. They're prioritized. And then it's determined what the source of funding is. This is the best source of funding for this, as well as the Call-Up Memorial ones as well, because they support the attraction of tourists to our region. The reason why we need bleachers is because of the Quinte Skyhawks football team. They need more capacity for people to attend and watch games. The bleachers are not only going to be for them. We used the bleachers for the Christmas light display last year, the Santa Claus parade last year. We moved those bleachers to different parts of the city where people can take advantage of it. Last year, the summer, they were at Jane Forrester Park. We move all over the city as necessary, and this is an important part for that tourism attraction. In 2019, the Economic Development and Destinations Committee delivered 0 capital projects for the capital budget that we went into this year. That prompted me to write a letter to the EDDC suggesting that they spend some time and bring forward recommendations for the 2021 capital budget. What we received from that committee was $50,000 for pop-ups to add to the pop-up program. We didn't receive any other tourism development inventory programs. We didn't have any other ideas for enhanced capital projects. And instead what we're hearing, and I haven't seen it yet, but apparently we're going to be getting a report which is going to include operating budget items for us to support the economy. And that's fine, but let's not forget there's $122,000 left after we fund the Call Memorial and the portable bleachers. And those are funds that can be used for that. But, one of the frustrations I have is we can talk all about this, but we didn't get a list of capital projects from that committee saying, we believe this is what we can do to enhance the inventory of tourism activities in the city of Belleville. And so then Director Hines and her staff go through and match up some projects that this funding is ideally situated for, and that's what they're making the recommendation for. And then we have people say they want to use casino funds. It is splitting hairs, and that's the issue. The other thing I would say is that, Councillor Thompson and Councillor Kelly came and spoke to me about this and said, why was it selected? And this is some information we're hearing, some concerns. Nobody else came and asked me how this got in here or what happened to it. Councillor Sanderson didn't have anybody go to him as chair of the committee asking him for that information. And yet we want to do this on the floor here rather than having it be resolved before. And so then the question becomes, what type of behavior do we want councillors around the table to be dealing with when they come up with questions or concerns about funding things? The final thing I just want to say, which I think is fundamentally important, is that, we are collecting this municipal accommodation tax to benefit the tourism sector in our city. Half of the money that we collect goes to the Bay of Quinte Regional Marketing Board, which is doing an excellent job. The other half, we have to decide how we can best spend it. And obviously on the capital side, investing in inventory and tourism-related projects that people will come for is the best way to go about it, and I will not be voting in favor of the amendment. I will call the question. All in favor of the amendment? Opposed? It's carried. Next item on the agenda is 1.059, the Thurlow Dog Park for $100,000. Councillor Thompson, you had brought this up.
Yes, I have, and I got a couple of questions. Understanding, talking to you, Your Worship, and to Carol or one of the finance people, might have been Brandon, the funding for the dog park, we are eligible some funding from the government to do this now, and what's the timeline to have it done?
Director Hines?
So we're proposing that we use the COVID-19 resiliency funding that was recently announced. The total allotment for the city of Belleville is $1.12 million. So we would use $100,000 of the $1.12 million for the Thurlow Dog Park. We've also proposed a number of other parks-related projects for the balance of the funding. The criteria for the funding is such that the project has to be commenced before September 30th of 2021 and has to be completed by the end of December 2021.
Okay, and I agree, and I brought it up at one of our meetings about a dog park. It's, I think it's needed out in Thurlow. It's used quite a bit. I'm concerned also, now that we're going to build the fairgrounds out there for the Agricultural Society, would we not be possibly to look at that as a future project at a less cost when we're doing the facility, and I know this is speculation, but when you look at it, we only got 10, 12 parking spots, and if you're down at this dog park down here, and I'm not there very often because I don't have a dog, but there's certainly a lot more than 10, 12 cars there at any time. And I am concerned about the location now that we have purchased property for the fairgrounds. So my question is there any appetite to put this off, use that funding for someplace else, and build that dog park in a couple of years when we do the fairgrounds?
Councillor Thompson, I might be best to answer that question for you. So first of all, we don't know when this facility would be available if we were to put it on the fairgrounds property. Right now, the residential area that would be close to Highway 37 would be in that Canifton area. This is, between Caniff Mills and Heritage Place. It's a much more urban area where the Maitland and Farnham Road areas. There will be many more. I think people will be walking to get to this potential dog park. While there are parking spots, those are mostly for accessibility issues. And whereas if the Zwicks facility we have now is further away from residential areas, people have to commute there. But also people are parking in that parking lot to use the entire Zwicks East and West facility. So I don't think they're comparable. The idea behind the parking area there was to give those who have accessibility issues somewhere to be able to come and unload and use the park. But the vast majority of people that are anticipated to be using it will be walking to it.
And I could appreciate that. Just like the one that's in Belleville, most people have to drive to it. There is the possibility of walking to it too also. But when you look at the location, a dog park is sometimes not the most quietest place. And we're going to be backing that dog park up to a residential area. And if we move it, and the only reason I'm bringing it up now is because we have that discussion now because with buying the other property for the Agricultural Society. And, we've looked at this, we need it. I'm going to put a motion on the floor to defer it until 2022 when we develop the fairground property.
All right, so Councillor Thompson is making motion to delete or defer. Mr. McDonald? Defer, motion to defer. Is there a seconder for that? Seeing no seconder, the amendment is not recognized. Do you want to?
No, the
Okay.
people have spoken,
Yeah.
that's fine. I've
Okay.
made my point, and that's really
Yeah.
what I wanted to do. Thank you.
Fair enough. There'll be some more discussion on it, Councillor Thompson. Again, but I know some. Councillor McCaw, you wanted to speak on this.
Yes, thank you, through you. I was quite excited to see this come forward. And the icing on the cake here is that it's coming from a $100,000 COVID Resilient Fund. So I'm thrilled to see it. I'm thrilled to support it. And even better, we're getting a grant for it. So I think the importance of doing it now and receiving those grant funds gives me all the reason in the world to believe that now is the perfect time to do it.
Thank you. Councillor Sanderson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just in response to the alternate location, I had discussed that very spot with some around the table, and part of the issue is that you can't. Number one, you can't walk to it, and number two, you've got to cross Highway 37 to get to that point if it ever did become a dog park. But so I don't own a dog currently, but I think dog parks and the walking trails and on-off access and playgrounds, it's all part of what makes a community a community. And so, as has been mentioned, we've got a dog park currently in Ward 1. And so putting this particular dog park in Ward 2 will help, provide an amenity for the residents that live specifically around Caniff Mills and Heritage Park. And I can tell you that I did post something up on social media, and the response, except one, was overwhelmingly in support of it. So the fact that, as Councillor McCaw mentioned, that there is funding available, and the timing is such that it has, in order to be eligible for that funding, you have to use it next year. This is city-owned property that basically is shovel-ready, so I'm fully support it.
Okay, anyone else? Councillor Carr?
Thank you. Before I have comments on it, I know Mary invited myself and Councillor Sanderson to join you for some door knocking in that area. I wasn't available. I was out of town. And I haven't heard from the residents that abut on the back of this park. What's their reception to dogs and barking and things of that nature?
It was what I describe as a home run, a very enthusiastic support for this project. They recognize that, the previous developments that were proposed were out of keeping, and that the city has to do something with this, and they thought it was a very good idea.
Okay, and that's certainly good to hear. And it was touched on already. If this wasn't grant money coming from senior levels of government, I couldn't really support using property taxes at the municipal level to support this. At the end of the day, our community's not that large. Getting in the car and driving 10 minutes to take your dog into a dog park is not the same as if you were crossing the GTA, for example. However, the fact that, and Mary, you referred to some of the alternatives that could have been placed there. This is certainly much better. This piece of property, at the end of the day, we overpaid for it, but we had to solve an issue. This is a more passive use of that piece of property, doesn't just keep it vacant. I will say, though, that because of the location and the theory behind it that people will walk to it, and I'm going to plant the seed now, is the Farnham Road reconstruction then should really be, on our radar in terms of moving forward, because Farnham Road as it currently exists would not be a road that a pedestrian and a dog would want to walk. We hear that time and time again. Councillor Sanderson and I certainly do, and issues come to the Transportation Committee to how do we solve the traffic issue, the speed, the volume, etc. And so by putting this park with some pedestrian thought behind it, we need to be mindful of the fact that as our community continues to grow in that area, that we're also providing the active transportation infrastructure to actually support this park. And then looking at both the federal and the provincial governments for their COVID resiliency, and look through the backgrounder on that as well, and this is more for the public. The theory is this money has to be invested in ways and means that allow for physical distancing. And so by having a park makes the most sense of using that money. So this falls within the parameters of the money that senior levels of government are allocating out to municipalities. So we would be foolish not to jump on the opportunity. And so for those reasons, I'll support the project.
Thank you. Councillor Millette.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm going to support this as well. I did have questions. I know it kind of leapt out at me, pardon the dog pun, when I first saw it. But I asked Councillor Sanderson before the meeting why this was an ideal location for this. And for all the reasons that Councillor Carr just outlined, I believe that while I did not support spending the amount of money we did to secure this piece of property, the next problem was we had this piece of property and what to do with it. And as I said to Councillor Sanderson shortly before the meeting, this is certainly better than simply a parkette that would be very rarely used. We have examples of lovely parkettes in this city that are simply at an intersection and they just look nice. I would rather see an active use of a piece of property like this. And being a dog lover, I love the idea of a dog park. I I'd been to the one here when my daughter had a dog that was alive, but, this funding source as well is an ideal use of this money, and while my earlier concern was why not at the new fairgrounds property, I'm satisfied that it is a little bit out of the way, especially for the goodly number of new homes that are being built in that area, and as was pointed out, the people who are investing large sums of money and paying good taxes in that area deserve the amenities that some of the people, or most of the people in the urban ward, take for granted. So I'll support it. Thank you.
Right. Councillor Williams.
Thank you, through you. And yeah, I think it's a great project. I know years ago when I was chair of Bay County Tourism, I submitted an application for it was a planning award called Great Places in Canada, and we submitted Zwicks Park, and it was the dog park at that time. I remember the people behind it got behind it, and somehow we won it for all of Canada. Now the planners got down and saw the submission and ended up giving to the Forks in Winnipeg, which was probably well deserved. But that dog park area has always been well loved in the area, and I think this to the north and to add something to Thurlow is just a great addition to that spot. And I think when we envisioned buying that piece of property, that's what we wanted to see. My just question for staff is this currently, or as it's being developed, will it be added and tied into the active transportation network, at least for the short time where we have people who are able to, on the new development that Andy Gertzma is completing north, and the Stakos development, will people be able to actively find their way there without getting tied up with traffic?
Do you want to? Mr. Bove, do you want to?
Strictly through the chair of the council, the design work is it's already identified the need for active transportation on Farnham Road, and the location of the dog park is close to the roundabout, which allows a pedestrian connection to the trail system that's in place along the Moira River as you go upstream from the bridge at Maitland Drive. And so folks in Moira Court and the Camp Mills subdivision can access the dog park through the trail system that runs along the river and through the stormwater facility that's at the south end of the subdivision. And certainly going forward, it'll be tied into the pedestrian facilities on Farnham Road.
Yeah, so just for the benefit of people listening at home, Director Bove, or CEO Bove said that it'll be tied into an active transportation network. When Farnham Road is done, there'll be sidewalks. They'll connect it to Caniff Mills, connect it to Moira Court, and to the trail system that's along the river front there.
Great, thank you.
Okay, Councillor McCaw, and then we'll wrap up. Do you have something else you wanted to say? Yeah. Okay. I do have some comments because I have been involved in this, very early on, and I know that, a comment was made that some of us didn't support the purchase of the land. Well, we all supported the purchase of the land. None of us liked the price that we had to pay to purchase the land, but we supported the purchase of the land so that we would have a different use. And, COVID, has made a lot of impacts, and we were not able to get around. But I did do 3 nights worth of door knocking in this neighborhood over the course of the summer when it was safe. I did it outside, and I took around proposed drawings, and I went to sort of get the temperature of residents in the area, and I explained to them why I was there. Many of them were really quite surprised that I would actually take the time to come and do it. But we talked about the fact that what we should do there, and I predicate this all on the idea that Thurlow residents deserve services too. And a lot of them, for many years, have found that the city has grown up, and there's been not a fixation, but a focus, certainly, on Belleville urban, and that they are looking for services as well. So, when we looked at this piece of property, it is a good spot for an off-leash dog park. It is close to neighborhoods. There are already many people who are walking in those neighborhoods, walking with pets. This allows them to go to an area that they can let their pets off leash. They can run. And if you look at the justification sheet, it talks about the socialization, not just of the animals, but also of the owners. So that is a good thing there. The there's already a lot of existing park space, including playgrounds in this area. So, just deciding that this area would be another playground, for example, really wouldn't be an efficient use of our space. But we don't have another off-leash dog park in this. So I thought this was a great idea. Also, one of the big concerns we had about the previous development was about the potential for expansion of Farnham Road in the future. That if we did have to widen that road, what would we do if the property in this area was already developed and had structures on it? So having this be an off-leash dog park gives us the ability to be able to expand Farnham Road in the future if we did need more space. And as I said to Councillor Carr in his question, the overwhelming response from the community was they thought it was a great idea. They thought that it could definitely be used. I can't tell you how many dogs I saw when I was door knocking all these homes. Almost everybody had a pet at home, and so they were all really looking forward to it. But this also, I think, raises some other issues that we need to address. And while the dog park is one step, it's not the last step. Thurlow is not just farms and snow. Thurlow is a very established urban neighborhood. There are many people who have homes. They are on water services. They have city water. They have city sanitary. They have city stormwater services. They are paying amongst the highest taxes in the city of Belleville. But yet I was surprised by some of the conversations saying, why would you put a dog park in Thurlow Ward when it's all farmland anyways? And I think many people, have misunderstood that. These are, I said, urban neighborhoods with residents. They pay high taxes, and they want additional services in the city. They want additional outdoor space. They want to be able to have walking trails, playgrounds, splash pads, sports facilities, just like other parts of the city. They want transit service. And many of these urban residents living in these neighborhoods are increasingly seeing themselves as not part of Thurlow, but part of Belleville Urban. And I raise that because this is sort of the challenge that we do when Councillor Carr and Councillor Sandison and myself, as representatives of Thurlow, are trying to work on that dichotomy. Because at the same time we have a built-up urban area, we also still maintain, and we're really proud to maintain, the rural part of Thurlow, where there are people that are on farms and they're actively farming, and they don't want those services that I spoke about, whether it be water or sewer or transit or whatnot. And so when we move forward, we're going to have to figure out a way to be able to solve that issue. But at the same time, I think this is a really important first step. And it's not the last step that, as I said, we'll be dealing with it. But we have a lot of residents who prefer that rural lifestyle and see their interests as different from their neighbors that are living in the urban sector. And we have a lot of urban residents who see themselves as the Belleville urban portion of the city. And we will move on that. So with that, my colleagues, we've had good discussion. I think everybody sounds like they are in favor. I'll call the Councillor Thompson.
Seeing I brought it up, I'd just like to reiterate, I am in favor of a dog park, just there was the location of it and the timing of it, but
Fair
definitely
enough.
in favor of the dog park.
Okay. All in favor? It's carried. All right. So it's noon, and I think we have one item left to deal with under this. So, well, actually, there's two items because we do have to deal with the resilience funding motion afterwards. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to suggest we just push through. We can deal with these two items, and then we'll be able to actually break. So we'll break ahead of schedule. But item number 1.60, and I forget who brought that up. Councillor Millette, thank you. Councillor Millette.
Thank you, Your Worship. And I'm wholeheartedly in support of a memorial to Dr. Collop and his important contributions. I just had a couple of questions about the urgency of this, how long this may have been in the works, because I don't really have a lot of backstory on this, and I didn't quite know who to ask about the backstory on it. January 2022 marks the 100th anniversary of the development of insulin, and I guess my point was, could we not, because we are in a COVID year and we, funds for various things in ways of helping our local tourism industry and/or our local businesses might be a little more in demand or needed. Perhaps maybe delaying this a year. I don't know and again, I don't know the timeline for developing this. And again, I'm fully in support of it. As a matter of fact, I'd like to see a little bit more of an enhancement on it, spelling out the actual significance of it with maybe a little more lettering on it in terms of development of insulin, because the average passerby just might see it as a monument to a doctor. That's beside the point. But if someone could explain to me why we need to see this happen right away, or if it can wait, but
well, I can start out with it. Prior to COVID in 2020, this year, I had a visit from Rolly Tipper and a committee representing the Hastings Historical Society and I think the family of Dr. Pierce, who's had a big interest in maintaining the life story of Dr. Collop, who is from Belleville, brilliant person who went on. And the focus was on the 100th anniversary of the refinement of insulin to where it could actually be used and save the first life of a young boy in Toronto who was in a diabetic coma. And at that time, there was no prospects for survival for people. And it was Dr. Collop, who happened to be visiting his colleagues, Banting and Best, and he was able to refine it into a point where it actually saved the life. And so Dr. Collop's the one who actually was able to invent insulin for diabetics and refine it. So when the anniversary is in January, so the issue here is that we want to have it completed for January. In order for it to be completed in January, it has to be a capital project for 2021. So when the committee came to see me, we engaged Joe Reed and Roland Cave Brown Cave about some potential locations. They have been working on the fundraising side, and what you've seen as this diagram is what is the proposal. It'll be along the Bayshore Trail. It'll be a beautiful resting space for people to gather while they're walking, particularly when COVID is beyond us, and that's where the project initiated. Working with staff, we identified Campbell's Monument. They've got the drawings. You have them in your package, as well as the funding source. We expect that if it's ready in time, which is our intention, if we defer it, it won't be ready in time. But if it's ready in time, we can take advantage of the publicity surrounding the 100-year anniversary for the discovery of insulin, and have an opportunity throughout the year to be able to attract people who will want to come to the display while they're visiting Belleville.
Okay, thank you. And I'll support this. And if as well, it's a tribute to the commitment of Dr. Pierce. And I knew Dr. Pierce when he was a practicing physician in this community, and he was an amazing man. So kudos to him and the committee, Mr. Tipper, and everybody who helped make this happen. So I will support it.
Right. Councillor Thompson.
Yeah, two of them. One question, and then I'll make a statement. The $110,000 for the project, it states in here that they'll be raising funds. So the funds that they raise, will the funds go back into the MAT funding?
It'll repay the funds for that.
So it'll go back into the MAT
reserve
funding.
account, yes.
And the other, I'd just like to make note that the Historical Society also has a plaque at the library in memory of Dr. Collop and what he's done. So this is just a nice, beautiful plaque down there, but this will be the second one for Dr. Collop in the city. So,
that's right.
Thank you.
Councillor Kelly.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to be supporting this. I did reach out to the mayor when it did come to us a week ago, just to kind of see what was moving forward. And when you go to behind the hospital, you see the Kiwanis Bayshore Trail there and the Rotary Exercise Park. It's just a nice fit. I'm on the Glenmore Historical Committee, and there's more to tourism. Also, as a member, I'm speaking for the Bay of Quinte Regional Marketing Board too, with tourism. There's more to tourism to me anyway than pop-ups, soccer, football, trips to the county. We have to look at a different group of individuals that like the historical part of Canadian history, whether it's a tour or a fun day at the Glenmore Historical Site Museum, maybe taking a trip west to our friends at CFB Trenton. And you look at this doctor's history, I read a bit about him. He sold the patent for insulin to the University of Toronto with his other friends for $1. Mm-hmm. So this guy wasn't obviously in it for the money. And I think it's just a nice way to show some of the history. He left Belleville at the age of 15, but he went on to do great things. And it's a chance with all those beautiful park benches to kind of reflect. And I think it is part of tourism as well. So it's a different individual that we might be attracting than somebody wanting to run down to the Swicks Park in their shorts and going canoeing, which is nice too. But this is another option for those that may have an interest in respecting the history of this country. That's it.
Right. Okay. We've had a couple of comments about Dr. Collop, and Rolly Tipper there was a great article in the Intelligencer that Rolly Tipper had submitted, and just to remind some people about the fact that Collop was born in Belleville on November the 20th, 1892, and he was the son of a market gardener and attended the Belleville market often in his youth. And he graduated from high school at 15 years old. And talking about how brilliant he was, he went on to the University of Toronto and then earned a degree in chemical and biological engineering. And then at 20, he got his master's degree. And at 21, at 21, he got his master's degree. And at 24, he received his full PhD. He moved to take a job in Edmonton at the University of Alberta, which is my alma mater, and he worked very, very hard there. He was highly respected and a much sought-after professor in the burgeoning new field of biochemistry. In the autumn and the fall of 1921, Tipper was on sabbatical, and Collop was on sabbatical, and he came back to visit some of his former student mates and colleagues at the University of Toronto, and they were working on finding a cure for diabetes, but they had not been successful. And so he decided to, along with Professor J.J.R. McLeod and Dr. Frederick Banting and his grad student Charles Best, so Banting and Best, which is widely being given credit for discovery of insulin, but Collop worked with them, and he made the progress in extracting a material from the pancreas that they had called insulin, but could not get to the point where it could be used on humans without side effects. And that's what Collop did. He was able to do that. And on December 1921, they had started working, and in January, he purified the insulin to the point where it could be used safely on humans. And on January 23rd, 1922, it was used for the very first time and successfully on a dying 14-year-old boy at Toronto General Hospital. Since then, the lives of countless millions of diabetics around the world have been saved because of Dr. Collop. He was awarded the Order of the British Empire in 1946, the President's Medal of Freedom in 1947 from the United States. He returned to Ontario in 1961 to go to the University of Western Ontario, and he died in London on June 19, 1965. And so in 2012, the City of Belleville declared November 20th to be Dr. Collop Day in the City of Belleville. As Councillor Thompson rightly points out, there is a plaque at the Belleville Public Library to talk about this, and this will be a beautiful new memorial for him, one in which I think will set sort of the standard for us as we deal with memorials or things to recognize individuals from Belleville in the future. All right, anyone else? Councillor Williams.
Thank you, through you. And yeah, I think when we look at this as a tourism draw, and if it was something that went to the committee, I think it's something that it does look at our history and memorializing our history and some important, people that were here. Sir Mackenzie Bowl will be another one, obviously, that we know well. And I know that we had the presentation last year from Quinte's Walk of Fame, which would be also something in the future that I think people are there for. This does fit, I think, within the MAT. I think it does do something, and it leaves enough money for staff, I think, to do what they need to do this year during COVID, which is really important. I think just to the point of some comments made earlier that MAT is only supposed to be brought through a capital budget process, and that is untrue. Again, the items that this committee are bringing are going to be brought through many significant areas, and they're going to be brought for a lot of different times during the year. MAT is meant to be used as it sits in reserve as per projects like this. But as it stands, I can support this one as it stands, and let's see this get done. And I really like that the fundraising may bring that money back. Thank you.
All right, the motion is on the floor. There's no motion on the floor. It was part of there was no amendment, so it's the original one. Director Hines, you want to speak a little bit about the COVID-19 resilience funding, that $1.12 million. Is that correct?
Yep.
The floor is yours.
So we have $1.12 million in COVID-19 resiliency funding that we need to make application for. That is our allocation, but we still have to go through an application process. So we have a number of projects. The deadline for submitting an application, if you have more than one project selected, is January the 7th. So we'll need to get started on our application shortly. Part of the application requirements is a council resolution and providing endorsement for the projects that are being presented. So I'll need a separate resolution for issues number 1.059 and then for 1.062 A, B, C, D, and E, which will use the funding up in its entirety.
Okay, so I think what I'll do is there is a resolution that the capital budget issues 1 to 1.805 as amended be approved. So that's already on the floor. So I'm going to call the question on that. All in favor? It's carried. Director Hines, now you're asking for another resolution that capital budget issues number 1.086.
1.059.
059.
And then I had labeled them 1.062 A, B, C, D, and E.
1.062. A, B, C, and D.
A, B, C, D, and E.
And E. B.
So we can name those off. So 1.059 being the Thurlow Dog Park, 1.062A Cascade Park, 1.062B Hague Park, 1.062C Stanley Parkette, 1.062D Bird Park, and 1.062E MA Sills Park,
All right.
for a total of $1,120,000.
And so by approving this motion allows Director Hines to make application through that revenue stream for funding. All right, moved by Councillor Sanderson, seconded by Councillor Millette. Any discussion on that? All in favor? It's carried. Oh, Councillor McCaw had, I made a mistake, Councillor McCaw, and I apologize. If I can go back to 1 to 1.8085, just to reopen it. So you had a 1.8086 you wanted to add. Can you please tell us about it?
Thank you, through you. And I'll just do a quick overview summary of last term. When we had a negotiating committee that had negotiated with the Belleville senators to come to Belleville, and one of the items that ended up coming out of that was that naming rights were taken away from the Belleville Yardmen, the CNR Yardmen, and given to the senators, which have subsequently renamed that arena, the CAA arena. At that time, I felt, and many others felt, that that was a problem. We formed a committee. I think it was Councillor Culhane who had originally put forth that committee, and I'm on it, and she was the chair. We were coming to this council to see about getting some funding towards that tribute for the Yardmen. I noted, and I spoke to Mr. Ling, who was bringing it forward. However, it was deferred until next budget. I'm hoping to bring it forward today, and since we've now freed up about $90,000 of MAT funds on the bleachers, I'm part of the funding for the tribute to the Yardmen. So it doesn't necessarily have to come out of MAT funding, but considering we've just done that for the memorial piece for Dr. Collett, I'm wondering if that might be an appropriate place for it to come from, or perhaps Director Hines might have another idea. But I'm going to ask, it was originally for $100,000. I'm happy to reduce that to $90,000 if I could get support and someone to second that.
Okay, let me just, I'm trying to think this through. So you're asking for capital support of something that this committee is going to be making a recommendation for. You're looking for a funding stream, and you're proposing municipal accommodation tax. Can I make a suggestion?
Certainly.
Why don't, I know the committee, I think, is meeting on December the 9th. Is that correct? Your first meeting, or the 8th? I would feel more comfortable if we had an actual plan of what you're proposing to spend the funds on, with an explanation, and then we can build the case for why, if it's a municipal accommodation tax, you're recommending why it's an appropriate use because of bringing tourists to the region or whatnot. And then we could always, at some point, reopen the capital budget prior to April when it's finalized, and look at inserting that in there. My concern, Councillor McCaw, is that if you bring it up today and if you don't get sufficient support to have it approved, it's going to be done for the year, and you'll lose the 2021 season. So, of course, it's your prerogative to do it however you want. My advice would be to go back with the committee. I know you guys the committee was making good progress, so you have to now, you'll work with your vice chair until we replace Councillor Culhane's role on that committee, and staff can help you by firming up a proposal and then have it come to us there. But I think you've put us all on notice that this year there's going to be some type of a proposal coming from the committee, and that's excellent. We all, I think, are very supportive of the fact that we want to remember the Yardmen and all the efforts that were made to pay for that facility to begin with, particularly when the naming rights of that arena were changed.
With that in mind, we can do that. We can, as a committee, go back and actually get that. I know that the proposed monument is going to be far greater than that. That was just sort of a starting point for fundraising. However, we can do that. We can go back. I would just hate to defer it another year. I think it would almost be another slap in the face to the fact that those naming rights were ripped from them to start with. So I don't want to delay it any longer, but if you can assure me that it
well,
can be
my
brought
suggestion
forward.
is it's better to bring forth the proposal, and you can bring it forward up until the April when we will be finalizing that budget, and then we can. I know we've all said in the past that we support retaining that important history in a city, and we want to be supportive. But asking us to support something that we don't know what it's really going to be, we don't know how much it's really going to cost, and we don't know how long it's going to take, it's probably unlikely to pass, which would be unfortunate. I think you can probably set yourself up to have a better outcome.
Okay, I'll take that advice, and we'll have something before April, hopefully.
All right, so then we've passed that item, so now we are on council information items. We have none, correct? Motion to rise and report. Councillor Thompson?
Yeah, I just.
Motion to rise and report?
No.
So, yeah, and then we'll do it under new business.
Okay.
Motion to rise and report. Councillor Carr and Councillor Millette, all in favor? It's carried. New business. Councillor Thompson.
It was more on the budget, and maybe I missed the point. I was going to ask Director Hines on the capital reserves. Is this the appropriate time?
Yeah,
or is it not?
absolutely.
I just looking at the capital reserve, we started out in 2019 at 106 million. Then we went down to 20 million or 90 million. Now we're down to 76. And I realize we certainly definitely need to be using reserves that have been sitting there. Do you have any concerns with using that many reserve funds to?
No, I don't. And I'd just like to highlight, as I mentioned in my presentation, there's a heavy concentration on water and wastewater projects in the 2021 capital budget. And the way we fund those is any money that's raised from water and wastewater rates goes directly into the reserve. So when we fund the projects, they draw out of the reserve. That's a little bit different than we do for taxation-based projects where we have a contribution directly from taxation every year. In theory, we could be taking all of that money and putting it directly into reserve and funding it from a reserve like the capital levy. So I don't have concerns. I understand that capital projects and capital management requires things to move through a timeline, and that, things aren't going to be equal every year. So, and again, it's basically due to the heavy concentration of water and wastewater projects in the budget, so.
If that keeps those rates down, I'm pretty happy with it.
Didn't say that.
Anyone else
I
for
didn't say that.
new business?
Just want to add that in there.
Anyone else for new business? Seeing none, then I will ask for that bylaw number 2020-225, a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of council at its special meeting held on December the 1st, 2020, be read a first, second, and third time and finally passed this first day of December 2020. Moved by Councillor Sandison, second by Councillor Kelly. All in favor, it's carried. Motion to adjourn, Councillor Carr and Councillor Kelly, all in favor, carried. Thank you very much, everyone, and thank you to staff.